The first thing I found was a hotel key sleeve in a drawer that should have held nothing more suspicious than spare floss and travel aspirin. It was tucked under a stack of guest towels in the downstairs powder room, the room Gail kept ready for people who might stop by without warning. She was like that, the kind of woman who made a house look as if it expected company and approval in equal measure. The sleeve was cream-colored, heavy paper, the kind designed to feel more exclusive than necessary, with the name Harbor House pressed into it in small gold letters. Inside was no keycard, just the sleeve. That was what made it worse. A missing keycard suggests use. A sleeve by itself suggests disposal, or forgetfulness, or a moment when somebody was in too much of a hurry to hide everything properly. I stood there with that little paper sleeve in my hand and listened to the house. The air conditioner cycled on. A sprinkler clicked somewhere out front. My wife moved around upstairs, humming faintly while she got ready for a donor luncheon she had mentioned twice that week. The whole house sounded normal. That was the insult of it. Everything around me still believed in the marriage I thought I had. My name is Barry West, and at the time all this started, I was the director of athletics at a small private college on the Gulf side of Florida. Not a place with a stadium that made television. Not a place where boosters wore rings big enough to scratch wood. We were smaller than that, and in some ways more delicate. At schools like ours, image is infrastructure. If parents trust the campus, donors trust the mission. If donors trust the mission, coaches get recruiting budgets, trainers get equipment, and the president gets to stand behind podiums talking about holistic development without sounding like a liar. My job was part operations, part diplomacy, part adult supervision. I managed coaches, budgets, travel, compliance, facilities, parent complaints, donor breakfasts, and the 1,000 low-grade problems that can turn into a season-ending mess if you wave them off because the scoreboard still looks clean. That was the lens I lived through. You learn to notice when details stopped aligning. A player who was suddenly too polished in a meeting might be hiding trouble in a class. A coach who over-explained a minor scheduling issue was often trying to get you not to look at a bigger one. Programs like people told on themselves in the small places first. Gail used to tease me about that. Barry can walk through a locker room for 30 seconds and know who is lying, she would say. She always made it sound affectionate. Maybe it was. Maybe she understood my habits better than I understood hers. From the outside, our marriage looked stable in the adult, enviable way that makes other people relax around you. We had been together 9 years. We lived in a clean, bright house with dark shutters and a tidy backyard. Gail was 34, beautiful in a way that never looked accidental, and deeply committed to appearing effortless. She volunteered with literacy groups, chaired committee luncheons, helped with campus auxiliary events, and could make a folding table in a multi-purpose room look like somebody's idea of refinement. She knew flower vendors, seating politics, and which local women used the word community when they really meant visibility. She was not shallow, not exactly. That would have made this easier. She could be warm in private, funny in ways she saved only for me. When we first married, she used to put notes in my overnight bag before away tournaments. Eat a vegetable today. Try not to adopt another struggling pitcher. Don't let the golf donors trap you. Those little things matter when you are building a life. They settle into the structure. You start believing care is load-bearing. That is what betrayal crushes first. Not the trust, the meaning of ordinary tenderness. Before I tell you what that key sleeve became, subscribe to Reddit Ride, like the video, and leave a comment. That support helps the channel grow, and it helps stories like this find the people who know what it means when one quiet detail changes the temperature of a whole room. The outside tip came 3 days before I found the sleeve. It was a call to my office late on a Wednesday, just after I had finished a compliance meeting about recruiting contacts and was trying to untangle a transportation problem for our softball team. My assistant buzzed and said there was a man on the line who claimed he knew my wife and thought I should hear something privately. That sentence alone is enough to make your body go still. I told her to put him through. "Mr. West," the man said, "my name is Tony Rivas. I'm sorry to call like this. I really am." "Why are you calling?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough to sound like somebody stepping onto ice he did not trust. "I work events at Harbor House. Valet and banquet support." Your wife has been there more than once. Last weekend, she left a small cosmetic pouch in one of the ladies' rooms near the private ballroom. I found it and brought it to the desk. I only recognized the name because one of the cards inside had West on it. I did not say anything. He went on. I wasn't going to call. It wasn't my business. But when she came back for it, she acted like she had never been there before, and she tipped the front desk girl too much for not asking questions. Then yesterday I saw her again, and she was with a man old enough that I first assumed he was a donor or someone's husband. But they didn't move like that. Like what? Like people used to being careful. That phrase stayed with me. Used to being careful. Not reckless. Not first-time nervous. Practiced. I asked him what was in the pouch. Toiletries. Makeup. Hotel key card. Nothing dramatic. I know how that sounds. I just figured if it were my sister, I'd want somebody to say something. Was he trying to help? To stir trouble? To settle some private score against a woman he did not know? At the time, I did not know. What I knew was how he sounded. I deal with 18-year-olds, coaches, donors, and parents for a living. I know evasive tone. I know opportunistic tone. He did not sound eager. He sounded burdened. What did the man look like, I asked. Fit. Older than you. Nice watch. Wedding ring. That described half the donor class in town. Still, I thanked him. I hung up and sat with my office door closed for a full minute, while a golf cart rattled by outside, and the campus kept doing what campuses do in the spring. Students moved between buildings with iced coffee and late work. A grounds crew leaf-blowed the same patch of sidewalk twice. Somewhere nearby, a whistle sounded from the practice fields. Everything ordinary. Everything offensively ordinary. I told myself there were explanations. Event planning. Volunteer committee use of a hotel ballroom. Borrowed room for a luncheon overflow. A donor meeting. A women's fundraiser. One older man in a wedding ring was not proof of anything. But my mind did what it does with weak explanations. It set them beside the details and checked for fit. The fit was poor. That night I did not mention the call. Gail and I ate salmon on the patio. She told me about seating trouble at an upcoming literacy luncheon. I told her our tennis coach was pretending a budget overage was a spreadsheet glitch instead of exactly what it was, which was a budget overage. She laughed and said, "You always know when somebody starts lying by how tidy they get. That's your weird gift." I laughed too. Then I looked at her and wondered how long a person could be that close to a truth without recognizing it was aimed at them. 3 days later, on Saturday morning, I found the Harbor House key sleeve. Gail was upstairs in our bathroom. I was downstairs looking for antacids because the campus fundraising dinner the night before had been heavy on shrimp and cheap optimism. The powder room drawer was where we kept household overflow. Extra aspirin, bandages, breath mints, guess things. That was Gail's domain. Everything in our house had a domain, and most of them belonged to her. The sleeve sat beneath the towels with the careless invisibility of something that had been hidden by a person who thought she was alone in her own system. I did not rush upstairs with it. I did not call out. I put it back precisely where I found it and stood at the sink looking at myself in the mirror. Broad face, tired eyes, a little more sun across the forehead than I should have had in May. I still looked like a man with a stable marriage. That was the unnerving part. There is no visible transition between husband and fool. At breakfast, Gail wore a pale green sundress and mentioned she might be out late helping reset centerpieces at St. Elmo's for a volunteer auction. The words Harbor House sat hot in the back of my mind. I almost asked, since when do centerpieces require hotel key sleeves? I said, "What time do you think you'll be back?" "Not late," she said. "Maybe after 9. She sliced strawberries into yogurt as if timing were a domestic detail and not a line item in a private audit I had not asked to conduct. The rest of that weekend I lived inside the first stage of suspicion, which is not anger. It is self-surveillance. You become embarrassed by your own eyes. Every question feels accusatory, even when spoken in your own head. You start watching the person you love and immediately feel ashamed for watching. Then she says something just slightly wrong, and the shame shifts back onto her, but not enough to free you. You are still stuck in the soft mud of uncertainty. That Monday I did something I am not proud of, and am no longer particularly ashamed of either. I checked the credit card statements more carefully than I usually did. Marriage has 1,000 arrangements inside it, some spoken, some not. Gail handled household presentation with almost religious devotion. I handled bills because I trusted numbers more than ambience. Usually that meant scanning totals, flagging anything odd and moving on. This time I looked line by line. No huge hotel charges. No obvious room service. No florists from secret addresses. Nothing that would satisfy a suspicious mind hungry for a neat answer. But there were smaller things. A boutique gas station near the bay where Harbor House sat. A lunch charge from a restaurant in a part of town Gale rarely visited. A cosmetics purchase listed as online, but delivered to a pickup location instead of our home. Small enough to explain. Small enough especially if you were not trying to build a second life. Or if you were trying very hard. I wrote nothing down. Not yet. That is another stage of suspicion. You think making notes would make it real, as though the truth must respect your reluctance. A week later, I found the toiletry pouch. It was in the trunk of Gail's SUV, beneath a folded grocery tote and a canvas bag from the literacy group. I was unloading bottled water for a student leadership event and noticed the zipper corner peeking out from under the tote. Cream leather, monogram G in small gold script. I knew it well. I had bought it for her 2 Christmases earlier because she had admired it in a shop window and then pretended it was too frivolous. I unzipped it because I had already crossed the line in my head, even if I had not admitted it. Inside was what Tony Rivas said there would be. Travel-size shampoo, makeup, a toothbrush still in plastic, a small packet of makeup wipes, the Harbor House key card, still active by the look of the coded strip, a matchbook from the hotel bar, and a folded cash receipt for valet, time-stamped on a Saturday night when Gail told me she had been at a volunteer planning meeting that ran long because a committee chair could not decide between cream linens and white. I held the receipt between my fingers and felt the exact moment when suspicion stopped being abstract. It did not become certainty. Not fully, but it became architecture. There was enough there now to infer intention. People do not accidentally maintain hotel toiletries, a key card, and a bar matchbook in a hidden pouch while also lying about their whereabouts. I put everything back, every item in the same place, the pouch back beneath the tote. Then I drove to campus because I had nowhere else to take my body. The baseball field was empty in the late afternoon heat. Our groundskeeper had just chalked the baseline for the regional send-off game the next day. The infield looked almost too precise, the way ball fields do when they are trying to promise fairness no game can keep. I stood behind the backstop and thought about all the times I had told a coach not to panic before we had facts. Facts first, I always said. Emotion later. If you reverse the order, you will start protecting the wrong thing. So I did the same for myself. I did not confront Gail. I started paying attention. The next 3 weeks were the longest part of the marriage and the most educational. People imagine investigation as movement. It is mostly waiting. Waiting in your own life. Waiting for a pattern to stop pretending it is random. Waiting while the person across from you folds napkins and kisses your cheek and asks whether you think the hydrangeas look too cold for a May table. Gail did not turn villainous under suspicion. That would have simplified her. She stayed recognizably herself. She texted me reminders about sunscreen before our outdoor events. She dropped off sandwiches at my office when we got stuck in meetings over budget revisions. She asked about one of my assistant coaches' sick mother because she remembered details like that and always had. More than once during those weeks, I caught myself wanting her to be innocent simply because the version of her I still loved kept showing up at the kitchen counter with sliced melon and a soft question about whether I looked tired. The betrayal would have been easier to process if she had become cruel. Instead, she became divided. That is much harder to live with. There were inconsistencies. Not dramatic ones. Never enough in isolation. A volunteer luncheon that ended an hour earlier than she said. A fresh manicure on a day she claimed she had spent hauling folding chairs with retirees at the literacy center. A call taken on the back patio in a low voice when our marriage had never been built around private calls. A new habit of taking her phone upstairs even to shower, then joking about all the women in her volunteer circles who texted too much drama to leave their messages where husbands could see. You would hate their group chats, she said once, smiling. Maybe, I said. That maybe sat between us. I do not know whether she heard what was underneath it. Around that time, I also found the hidden credit card. Not a dramatic black card in a secret lockbox. It was more ordinary than that, which made it worse. It lived in an old recipe binder on a shelf in the pantry, behind the printed card for Gail's lemon tart. The irony would have made me laugh if anything in me had still wanted to. It was a store-branded Visa in her maiden name, not because maiden names hide much, but because small deceptions rely less on invisibility than on being too boring to look at. There were charges: hotel bar, drugstore, fuel, online subscription services billed through a payment processor that did not make their identity obvious. When I pulled the statements through the issuer app, the subscription resolved itself. Ashley Madison. I sat on the pantry floor with my back against the shelves and read the charge history twice, because the first time my mind rejected the plainness of it. Ashley Madison. Not even a disguised merchant code. Not some vague media services line. The actual name. She had used a separate card because she knew it would be obvious on our joint account. Then she had not canceled it because, perhaps after enough secrecy, even the obvious begins to feel normal. I am aware that not everyone knows what Ashley Madison is, at least not immediately. It is one of those things you think you understand from headlines until it lands in your own marriage. In plain terms, it is a site built for infidelity. Not dating in the hopeful, single adult sense. Not companionship. Affairs. Deliberate, structured cheating sold as logistics and discretion. That mattered because it changed the emotional category of what I was facing. A person who drifts into one stupid, lonely mistake tells one kind of story. A person who maintains an affair platform over time is building access, seeking it, curating it, leaving a door open on purpose. I sat there on the pantry floor and thought about Gail placing lemons on a grocery list 3 feet away from a recipe binder, hiding an infidelity card. The ordinary and the obscene had been sharing shelves in my house for years. Years. That thought arrived before I had proof for it, which meant I resisted it. Because the middle of a story like this is not just investigation. It is self-defense against conclusion. You do not want ongoing behavior. You want a recent failure. You want a bad season, not a hidden leak. The burner phone came a week later. I found it because Gail asked me to bring down a storage bin from the hall closet, and the top shelf shifted when I moved the bin. Something thin slid behind a stack of old beach towels and hit the floor with a plastic clatter. Cheap black phone. Prepaid. No case. Powered off. My whole body went cold in a very physical, almost clinical way. When I turned it on, there was no lock screen. That detail told me as much as anything. A burner only needs protection from the world, not from the person who already thinks she controls the house it is hidden in. The messages were sparse because she had deleted most of them. But deleted is not the same as gone when a device has not been lived in long enough to overwrite itself. There were fragments. Room ready. Use the west entrance. You looked incredible tonight. Need more excitement than committees and school moms. That last one sat in my hands longer than the others. Need more excitement than committees and school moms. Not because it was the worst line, but because it was so revealing. The motive was not poverty, loneliness, fear, or even hate. It was appetite dressed as boredom. She was not fleeing misery. She was fleeing normalcy and calling it suffocation. There were also initials instead of names. Men reduced to 2-letter codes, some recurring, some one-off. One thread included a hotel room number and a joke about a man's golf tan. Another mentioned a gala downtown and an afterward drink, somewhere less local, structured. Rotating. Managed. I scrolled until my eyes started refusing language. Then I turned the phone off and put it back where I found it. Not because I was sparing her, because I was no longer interested in catching her. I was interested in understanding the scale. At work, my profession kept interrupting my collapse. That helped. College athletics is a young person's theater built on adult paperwork. There is always something breaking. A van route, a parent complaint, a scholarship appeal, a coach who swears he did not know a recruit's official visit, crossed a line when of course he knew exactly which line he was walking along. One Tuesday afternoon, Our women's basketball coach came into my office furious about a transfer rumor and dropped into the chair opposite me like she expected me to share the outrage immediately. "What do you think, Bari?" she asked. "She says she wants a better fit." "Better fit my ass." I looked at her, and before I could stop myself said, "People rarely leave for the reason they first name." She blinked. "That's not comforting," she said. "No," I said. "It is." I realized as soon as she left that I was speaking two languages at once now. Athletic administration on the surface, marriage beneath it. Everything in my life had become a lens. A week after finding the burner phone, I called a lawyer. Not a shark, not a television fantasy of divorce. A practical woman named Cynthia Rowe, whose husband chaired a local hospital foundation, and who had once sat beside Gail at a literacy breakfast. That mattered less than it might sound. In towns like ours, competence lives in a small circle. You do not choose a lawyer by secrecy. You choose by the odds they can hold a straight line while other people flail. I took her copies, not originals. Card statements, photos of the hidden phone, the Harbor House receipt, the key card, screenshots from the burner, my own quiet notes about dates and claimed volunteer events. She read without drama, which I appreciated. When she finally looked up, she said, "This is not one affair, Bari. This is a maintained pattern." I knew. "I think you did," she replied gently. "But hearing somebody else say it matters." "Yes. Do you want to confront first or secure first?" That question explained marriage collapse better than 100 sentimental books ever could. Confront first or secure first? Emotion or structure? Performance or protection? Secure first, I said. Good, she replied. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a strange clarity. Not peace, not even confidence, just clarity. I moved money where it could be moved, opened a separate account, changed beneficiary instructions where appropriate, gathered tax records, made copies of home documents, not because I wanted to punish Gail financially, but because the part of me trained by years of running athletic departments knew something simple. When a program is under investigation, you protect the institution before the press release. Later is too late. At home, Gail remained attentive in the old ways. That was the cruelest stretch. One night she brought me tea when I was up late reviewing travel rosters and rested her hand on the back of my neck, the way she had since our first apartment. I almost leaned into it out of habit. Instead, I sat very still while her hand stayed there for a beat too long and then left. Another evening, she asked whether I wanted to go with her to a volunteer dinner the next week because people kept asking after me. I said I had a baseball event. "You always have a baseball event," she said, smiling. "Maybe." Her smile flickered for half a second. She was noticing me then. Not what I knew, but that I was withdrawing from the old choreography. One Sunday morning, she stood in the pantry looking for vanilla and asked, "Have I done something lately? You feel far away." There it was, the opening. The ordinary husband in me wanted to say yes, and then spill everything onto the tile in broad daylight so I could stop carrying it alone. The disciplined part of me won. "I'm tired," I said. She studied my face. "From work, from everything," I replied. That was true enough to insult both of us. Suspicion changes memory. That is part of why the middle of a betrayal story feels so long even when measured by calendar. You start revisiting scenes that once seemed settled. A fundraiser 2 years earlier where Gail disappeared for half an hour and came back saying the women's room line was ridiculous. The way she had suddenly cared more about the gym than her body really required. Not from vanity exactly, but from maintenance. A beach weekend I missed because of conference meetings, after which she seemed oddly bright and said the quiet had done her good. The new lingerie, I assumed, was for us, and now had to consider might have been inventory. Each memory did not become proof. That would be too neat. Instead, they changed category, from harmless detail to unresolved signal. It is like watching old game film after you know a team was stealing signs. Every ordinary motion becomes suspect, not because every motion was dishonest, but because trust in the system is gone. The strongest piece of outside confirmation came from a place I would never have predicted. A volunteer wife with a conscience too slow for prevention, but not slow enough for permanent silence. Her name was Dana Mercer, and she cornered me gently after a campus arts benefit in June. Gail was across the room, helping rearrange dessert platters, because of course she was. Dana touched my forearm and said, "Bari, do you have a minute?" We stepped onto the breezeway. She looked sick even before speaking. "I may be overstepping," she said, "but I can't keep pretending I haven't noticed things. Gail has been meeting men through one of those discreet sites. I know because one of them was a friend of my husband, S, and he mentioned her without realizing I knew who she was. He showed my husband a picture once at the golf club. I saw it over his shoulder. It was Gail." The whole world seemed to go very still around one tiny, well-lit image in her sentence. "What site?" I asked, though I already knew. "Ashley Madison." "How long have you known?" "Known enough to be sure." "Since winter." "Suspected." "Longer." "Why tell me now?" Her face tightened. "Because she was at lunch last week talking about excitement and reinvention like she was bored by ordinary life, and everybody at the table pretended it was just volunteer gossip. Then I thought about what that would sound like if my husband were the one being spoken over. She did not say 'I am sorry.' She looked too ashamed for cliché. Did anybody else know? Not everything. Enough to speculate. Enough that if things crack, people will act as though it was obvious." That sentence hit as hard as any proof I had gathered. Social embarrassment had already begun in invisible form. Not public scandal. Whisper inventory. Women with pearls and husbands and committee badges, quietly understanding more about my marriage than I did for too long. When I walked back into the ballroom, Gail looked up and smiled at me from across a room full of centerpieces and polished glass. I smiled back because public collapse is rarely kind enough to happen on your timetable. That night, I sat on the lanai long after she went to bed and listened to the pool pump hum under the dark. No anger yet. That surprised me. Not because I was above it. Because the hurt was larger than anger and more organized. Anger wants a target. Hurt wants coherence. Need more excitement than committees and school moms. The line from the burner came back to me. That was her weakness in one sentence. Not lust. Not loneliness. Excitement. She had mistaken adrenaline for aliveness. Somewhere between literacy luncheons, polished tabletops, and volunteer circles built on soft rivalry, she convinced herself the ordinary dignity of marriage was a kind of confinement. So she outsourced excitement to strangers and secret hotel rooms, and a platform designed for people who wanted appetite without consequence. There is a particular humiliation in realizing your spouse has treated your shared life as a waiting room. I decided then that I would confront her at home, in the kitchen at night, when there was no audience to perform for and no one to rescue either of us from plain language. The timing came a few days later. Gail had spent the evening at a donor planning meeting for a school supply drive. She came home a little after 8 with a tote bag full of sample ribbon and a bakery box tied with white string. She kissed my cheek and said, "I brought you the lemon bars before the committee women got to them." I looked at the box, then at her, then at the kitchen she had designed around light and openness and hostedness, and all the careful little signals that said good wife, stable home, admired woman. "I think we should talk," I said. There is something in the voice when a man has crossed into certainty. She heard it immediately. "About what?" "Sit down." She set the box on the island. "Bari, sit down," I said again. She did. I did not begin with accusations. I began with objects, because objects do not flinch and they do not reframe. I laid the Harbor House key sleeve on the counter, then the hidden credit card, then the burner phone, then printed statements, then a screenshot of the Ashley Madison charges. Gail looked at the items, and I watched 3 different reactions move through her face in under 10 seconds. First confusion, then recognition, then the quick gathering of self a practiced person does before choosing which version of herself to present. "Bari," she said quietly, "this is not what you think." "No," I replied. "It's exactly what I think. That's why we're here." She shook her head once, very lightly. "The card is old. The hotel was for an event. The phone don't," I said. She stopped. That one word did more than shouting would have. I kept my voice even. "You can lie to a husband if he still needs help protecting the marriage. I'm past that part." She stared at me. The silence stretched. Then she tried a different angle. "You went through my things." "Yes, that is a violation." I almost laughed, but the feeling died before reaching my face. "And what would you call the rest of this?" Her eyes shifted to the phone, then back to me. It isn't how it looks. That is the sentence people use when they need time to build a smaller version of the truth. I did not let her. Ashley Madison is for affairs, I said. The phone has hotel messages. The card hid hotel charges. Dana Mercer knows enough to pity me. This is not a misunderstanding. It is a system. At Dana's name, something in her posture changed. She told you. She confirmed what I already knew. Gail inhaled slowly through her nose and let it out. That was the first true moment of the whole conversation. Not confession. Calculation ending. How long, I asked. She did not answer. How long, I asked again. A few years. The kitchen tilted a little. A few years. Not one lapse. Not a recent unraveling. Not a lonely season. Years. I looked down at the objects on the counter because if I looked at her too hard in that moment, I might have lost the calm I had protected. How many men? She pressed her lips together. Enough, I said. I'm not asking for names because I'm jealous. I'm asking because I'm figuring out what kind of life you built beside mine. She looked at the table runner she had ironed that morning. More than one, she said. That was as far as she could bring herself to go. Why? That is a useless question in some situations. In this one it mattered, because motive would tell me whether there was anything left in the marriage to understand. She was quiet for so long I thought she might refuse. Then she said, I got tired of feeling finished. Finished? I let the word sit between us. What does that mean? Her eyes finally lifted to mine. It means everything in this town is the same people, the same committees, the same dinners, the same safe conversations. It means every day looked polished and dead. It means I felt like I was disappearing into being the competent wife, the reliable volunteer, the woman who could always make things look beautiful for other people. I listened, not because I agreed, because understanding is cleaner than interruption. She went on. With them I felt seen, wanted, new, like there was still something unpredictable in me. Need more excitement than committees and school moms, I said. Her face changed. She knew then that I had read the phone more deeply than she hoped. Yes, she said softly. I guess that's one way to put it. I leaned back and looked at her. Do you hear how small that sounds? She flinched. Not to you, maybe, but from where I'm sitting. You blew up a marriage because being admired at luncheon started to feel repetitive. It wasn't just that, Bari. Then what was it? She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked away. Because there is no better language for appetite once you strip off the perfume. I said you were not trapped. You were bored. That landed harder than anything else. She stared at me as if I had reached across the island and removed the last flattering word from her version of events. I loved you, she said. I believe that you loved parts of what we were, I answered. I don't believe that love was steering. There were tears then, but not theatrical ones. Gail had too much discipline for messy collapse. Even hurt, she stayed composed in the body. That had always been one of her gifts. I never wanted to humiliate you, she said. No, I replied. You wanted excitement without consequences. Humiliation was just the part you outsourced to later. She covered her mouth with one hand. For the first time that night, I saw something like shame get all the way through. What do you want me to do? She asked. There is a moment in some games when both teams know the result before the clock runs out. The crowd may still be loud. The scoreboard may still offer arithmetic. But the structure of the contest is finished. That was the kitchen then. I want honesty for the first time in a long time, I said. Then I want you to move into the guest room tonight. After that, we handle everything through my lawyer and yours. There is no version of this where we talk it back into a marriage. Bari, no. She lowered her hand. Can we at least take time before? Time is what built this, I said. I'm not giving you more of the same material. That, I think, was the line that ended it more than any legal document later would. She stood slowly. I thought you'd yell, she said. No. Why not? Because that would make this look sudden. She went upstairs after that. Not dramatically. Not storming. Just carrying the quiet weight of her own house, suddenly, no longer arranged around her comfort. I stayed in the kitchen until long after the lemon bars sweated inside their box, and the under-cabinet lights were the only lights on in the room. The next weeks were less explosive than people imagine, and more degrading in the ways that actually matter. Social embarrassment did not arrive in one glamorous scene. It arrived through withdrawals. Women stopped calling Gail first for committee plans. One volunteer chair quietly replaced her on a luncheon without explanation. At church, a couple who usually hugged us both kept their greeting tidy and brief. The literacy board requested a pause in her work until things settled. No one said affair. No one said Ashley Madison. People like ours rarely need the noun if the contour of scandal has been mapped well enough. That kind of embarrassment is colder than public screaming. It lets a person feel the town editing them out in real time. I did not engineer any of it. That matters to me. I told my lawyer the truth. I answered questions plainly. I did not call husbands. I did not send screen grabs. I did not attend some donor event to drop evidence on a dessert table. That would have been revenge fantasy, and revenge fantasy is for men who need witnesses more than peace. Gail suffered the consequences of a private system becoming socially legible. That was enough. For a while she tried to reframe us in smaller conversations. A rough patch, she told one person. Personal struggles, another. I heard these phrases secondhand and let them pass. People always prefer the version of your pain that lets them keep brunch plans intact. Eventually, even that got harder for her because the facts were too shaped. Hidden phone, separate card, hotel trail. The pattern did not look like a rough patch. It looked like what it was. During that same period, I had to keep doing my job, which was its own mercy. Our soccer coach resigned unexpectedly for a better offer. The athletic trainer needed emergency approval for new rehab equipment. A donor wanted naming rights on a weight room, but only if his grandson's mediocre lacrosse film got a proper review. Students still needed guidance, buses still needed booking, and budgets still needed defense. That cadence saved me from turning into a full-time husband of a collapse. At one point in July, our compliance coordinator came into my office in a panic over an eligibility issue tied to an online class. A transfer had not properly completed. It was fixable but messy. She kept apologizing for bringing me another problem. It's fine, I told her. We just have to stop pretending partial truth is enough. She nodded, not knowing she was answering two lives at once. In the house, Gail and I became polite in the way divorced people often do before the paperwork catches up to the architecture. Not warm, not hostile, just stripped down to logistics. She slept in the guest room. We moved around each other carefully. Sometimes, in some weak human corner of me, that was harder than the confrontation had been. Familiar domestic motions continued. She still folded towels a certain precise way. I still reset the coffee maker the night before. Once she put my favorite mug beside the machine out of habit, and we both saw it and neither of us spoke. That is what real endings look like a lot of the time. Not thunder, habits with nowhere left to land. She asked twice whether I would consider counseling. Not because she believed counseling could rebuild what she had done, I think. Because counseling would have made the ending less final and more procedural. Another committee, another process, another chance to make management look like remorse. No, I said both times. By the second time, she stopped asking. The hardest private moment came not in the confrontation or the evidence, but one Sunday afternoon in August. I was cleaning out a drawer in the den and found a stack of note cards Gail had bought years earlier. On top was one with my handwriting from our 4th anniversary. Thanks for making home feel like a decision I get to keep making. I had written that after a season of long travel and donor nonsense and fatigue, back when gratitude still felt simple. I sat there with the card in my hand for a long time. Not because it changed anything, because I had to grieve the fact that I meant it and that she once may have deserved it. People who have never gone through this assume anger is the main event. It is not. The main event is revision. You have to let the past become less pure without letting it become fully fake. Gail was not always false. That is what hurt. Some of what we built was real. Meals, jokes, private gestures, care after hard days, plans made in good faith. Then she built something else alongside it and made me retroactively question everything. The mature work was not deciding she had always been hollow. It was accepting that a person can be loving in one room and disloyal in another for longer than you thought possible. That kind of knowledge ages you. By early fall, the legal structure was mostly settled. Assets divided cleanly. House to be sold after the new year. No children, which spared us the deepest form of permanent entanglement and left only the ordinary ache of rooms losing their purpose. Gail rented a small townhouse closer to downtown. I helped coordinate the movers, because competence is hard to switch off just because love has become unusable. On her last morning in the house, she stood in the foyer with a tote bag and keys in hand and said, "I know I don't get to ask for kindness, but thank you for not making this uglier than it had to be." I looked at her. "You made it ugly," I said. "I just stopped helping it stay pretty." She took that in and nodded once. Then she left. After she was gone, I walked through the rooms one by one. Not to dramatize it, to register the vacancy honestly. Her reading chair by the window. The pantry shelf, where the hidden card had lived behind lemon tart. The downstairs powder room, where the hotel sleeve first told on the rest. Our bedroom, which no longer felt like a marital room so much as a cleared set after a performance ended. I did not cry. I'm not saying that as a point of pride. It just was not the shape of the feeling. The feeling was colder and more spacious than tears. Like a stadium after the crowd leaves, and the lights are half off, and you can finally hear how much air the structure holds. The healing, if that is the word, happened in low places. Morning coffee, with no need to wonder whose phone had vibrated in the night. Workdays where my mind could sit fully inside scheduling and fundraising, instead of running a second clandestine audit beneath every task. A Saturday afternoon when I cleaned out the garage and found myself singing along badly to the radio, before realizing I had not checked a shared calendar in weeks. A donor dinner where someone asked after Gail, and I answered plainly that we had separated, and the world did not collapse from hearing the truth stated without decoration. Months later, at a basketball fundraiser, I saw Dana Mercer across the room. She came over cautiously, as though I might still blame her for being the one who confirmed what I already knew. "How are you?" she asked. "Better," I said. She nodded. "That looked true on you." I appreciated that phrasing more than sympathy. Better looked true on you. Not happy, not healed. True, that was enough. A few people later hinted that Gail had tried dating and found the town less open to reinvention than she hoped. Some women could forgive scandal more easily than they could forgive being made to host it by association. Men, predictably, remained available in theory and disappointing in practice. I did not need details. I did not collect them. Whatever excitement she had gone looking for, I doubt it sustained her in the daylight. That is not revenge. Just math. By the following spring, the house had sold. I moved into a smaller place nearer campus, more practical and less curated. There were fewer guest towels, and no powder room drawers hiding luxury hotel evidence. I planted herbs badly. I let one room stay, half-furnished longer than any design-minded person would recommend. The freedom of not managing perception turned out to be quietly addictive. At work, one of our younger coaches asked me over lunch whether I ever worried about programs looking good on the outside while drifting underneath. He was new and eager, and still thought competence meant catching problems early enough to make them disappear. "All the time," I said. "So how do you know when it's too far gone?" I thought about locker rooms, budgets, marriages, and every object ever hidden in a house that still smelled like lemon oil. When the energy goes into maintaining appearances instead of telling the truth, I said, "You're already late." He wrote that down like it was about athletics. Maybe it was. Maybe that is the only way we ever tell the truth after something breaks. We keep disguising it as professional advice until one day it becomes wisdom instead of pain. I do not hate Gail. That is important to say, because some endings go cleaner when hate is allowed to leave first. Mine never did. I understood her too well for hate to fit neatly. She wanted excitement, attention, unpredictability, proof that she was still vivid in rooms where everybody knew her role before she opened her mouth. She confused hunger with depth and secrecy with aliveness. That does not excuse anything. It just explains the machinery. And in the end, explanation is more useful than hatred. Hatred keeps a person hot. Explanation lets him cool. If there is one thing I learned from the whole wreck, it is this. A polished marriage can hide enormous disorder if both people benefit from the shine. But the truth eventually finds a small object to live inside. A key sleeve, a hidden card, a cheap black phone, something ordinary enough to be overlooked until it is not. After that, the whole structure starts talking. Mine did. I listened, and once I heard it clearly, There was no honorable way to pretend the house was still sound. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Reddit Ride, like the video, and leave a comment. That support helps the channel grow, and it helps keep stories like this coming for the people who know how much damage can fit inside a life that still looks beautiful from the street. She wanted excitement. I wanted something that could survive daylight. Only one of us understood what marriage was for.